In this final lesson, talking about the various different sources of knowledge in epistemology, what we're going to do is talk about memory. Memory is a crucial source of knowledge because it enables individuals to recall the past, recall their past experiences, to learn from their previous interactions, and to make decisions based on prior knowledge. So when we think about the context of memory within epistemology, we can see that memory is studied to understand how we know what we know about our own past, and most importantly, how reliable our recollections can be. And this gives us some quite deep insight into the kinds of philosophical questions that relates not only to the idea of knowledge and epistemology, but also to the idea of the mind and the philosophy of the mind. So, memory is often considered to be the mental process by which we store, retain, and retrieve information from past experiences. That's the sort of basic definition, of, if you will, of what memory is. And what memory does is it serves as a bridge between the past and the present, and allows us to draw on previous knowledge to inform our current thoughts and our current actions. Now, cognitive scientists, and to a lesser extent philosophers, have to distinguish between the various different types of memory. We have, for example, the idea of episodic memory. This is the memory of specific events or experiences from one's own life. So, for example, remembering your last birthday. Epistemic memory is often described as autobiographical because it deals with personal experiences. We also have semantic memory. Semantic memory is the memory of facts, concepts, and general knowledge about the world, and might not be tied to a specific event. So, for example, knowing that the capital of France is Paris. You might not ever have to go to Paris to know that. You might not ever have to be told that by a person and have to therefore remember that memory of you being told that. You might have just learnt that through the years, and now you have knowledge of that particular fact. You might not know where that knowledge came from, but it is a fact and a concept that isn't tied to a specific event. Then there's also procedural memory. This type of memory is concerned with how to perform tasks and skills, so things like riding a bike or playing the piano. It operates unconsciously and is not easily verbalized as a way of being able to explain how that particular operation works inside one's mind. And then finally, you have working memory. This involves the temporary storage and manipulation of information needed for tasks like reasoning, decision-making, problem-solving, or more active processes than that requires long-term memory. Speaking of long-term memory, there is also the categorization of memory on the basis of long-term versus short-term. So memory can be categorized by different types, as we've noted here with the 4 different types in dark brown. And then in the lighter brown, we can see here that we have memory categorized in different ways. So it can be categorized also on the basis of duration. Short-term memory or working memory holds information for brief periods. So, for example, you might memorize somebody's phone number long enough just in order to be able to dial it or to pass that information on to somebody else. But it is unlikely that you're able to remember somebody's phone number for many, many months or many, many years unless you use repetition to sort of convey that to long-term memory. Long-term memory, then, is the storage of information over extended periods, ranging from hours to even decades. Now, it is believed that we have virtually unlimited capacity in terms of our memory, but obviously the answer to that question is difficult. It's obviously difficult to know exactly what our limitation is. We don't have a hard drive full notification if and when we get to the limits of our memories. When we form new memories, the process of what is known as consolidation occurs. This is the process by which short-term memories are gradually transferred to long-term storage. This often happens when we sleep, and it is the process that is thought to involve the strengthening of neural connections in the brain. It actually causes a physical change in the way that your brain is structured and the neural connections that exist. Memory is typically understood to involve a series of stages. The first of these stages is known as the encoding process. This is in which we see information being perceived and converted into a form that can be stored in the brain. The way information is encoded can affect how easily that memory can be recalled at a later date. Once information is encoded, it is then stored as memory. The brain's storage systems, whether or not they are sensory, whether or not they are short-term or long-term, are responsible for keeping information over time. And then finally, you have the retrieval process. This is the process by which we can see the ability for an individual to access stored memory. Retrieval can be automatic, as in the case of just recalling familiar facts, or it can be effortful, as in your ability to try and remember specific details or specific events. Now, sometimes retrieval can lead to false memory, which can occur when the brain reconstructs memories inaccurately. And this obviously has major implications and associations when we think about epistemology and knowledge, which is going to be the next slide. So, ultimately, memory is an essential source of knowledge, especially regarding facts about our past experiences. Philosophers distinguish between memory as a process of recalling the past and past experiences, and memory as a source of knowledge as the past. So, when we recall something from memory, we can say that we know it. I know, for example, that I went to the shops yesterday because I remember doing so, or I know that I went to see family yesterday because I remember doing so specifically. Memory serves as a storehouse for personal knowledge, allowing individuals to retain lessons learned, experiences had, and facts that are encountered. Our personal memories of events, sometimes known as episodic knowledge or episodic memory, provides knowledge of the past, which, when assessed, can inform our current thinking, our current decision-making, and our own personal identity. Now, what's important to remember is that memory is not a perfect record of the past. And so when we think about research in cognitive psychology, it shows that there is often the case that memory can be reconstructed after it is recalled, essentially. So rather than being replayed, it can be reconstructed. So when we recall an event, we might unknowingly alter or maybe fill in gaps in our memory which were not originally part of that past experience. And so when we think about the concept and the role of memory in knowledge acquisition, memory allows us to build on what we have already learned in the past and enabling us to acquire further knowledge of the future. Without memory, then, we would be unable to make sense of new experiences, retain skills, or even have knowledge of our own selves from the past. All of this has really important implications for thinking about personal identity, because philosophers like John Locke have argued that one of the greatest ties to personal identity is this idea of memory. Locke's famous memory theory of personal identity suggests that a person at time t2 is the same as the person at time t1, if and only if they can remember their experiences at time t1. And so what this does is it creates a link between people and the idea of personhood and personal identity over time on the basis of being able to recall past events. And so according to John Locke, memory plays a critical role in the continuity of the self. So as philosophers and as epistemologists, the question of reliability of memory is of a major concern, because although memory is generally seen as a trustworthy source of knowledge, it is nevertheless not infallible. So various different factors may be able to compromise or to distort people's memory. And this raises questions about the accuracy of what can be remembered as knowledge. For example, you can have false memories. One of the most significant challenges is this idea of a false memory. False memories occur when an individual recalls events that did not actually happen, or remembers events differently than could be than is actually occurred. So research by individuals such as Elizabeth Loftus on the malleability of memory highlights how external suggestions, such as leading questions or even repeated exposures to certain ideas, has the ability to in fact alter a person's memory completely, to the point where they remember something based on the biases or the types of questions that they are being asked in a particular setting. So memory is therefore not like a videotape that stores a perfect, unchangeable record of the past. Instead, memory is reconstructive. It means that our brain often fills in gaps or makes inferences about details that we cannot actually recall. This is a reconstructive process that can lead to inaccuracies in our memory. Additionally, cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias or post-event misinformation, has the ability to distort different memories. For example, a person might remember the past in a way that aligns with their current beliefs or their current emotions, even if those memories are not a completely accurate picture of what actually happened. Memory can be influenced by social interactions, by group dynamics, and by social expectations. In situations like eyewitness testimony, the memory of an individual can be shaped by how the questions are framed, by what others say, and by the context in which the event is recalled. This is particularly important in legal contexts, where false memories can lead to miscarriages of justice. Finally then, when thinking about repeated recall, we see that this can strengthen memories, but it can also lead to what are known as memory errors. When individuals repeatedly rehearse certain memories, they may inadvertently add details that they were not originally part of their experience. This is a phenomenon known as memory consolidation, but it can also contribute to the formation of what are seen as distorted memories, so linking to the second point on this slide. So, of course, memory is a very important part of our studies in epistemology. It's a very important part of our understanding of where knowledge comes from as a source of knowledge. And so the role of memory in the acquisition of knowledge is often understood and often discussed in terms of its epistemic value and its reliability. So memory is considered to be a legitimate source of knowledge when it is accurate, but it is often treated with caution due to its susceptibility to error. So this idea of epistemic justification is a very important one when thinking about memory, because in order for memory to serve as a reliable source of knowledge, it has to be the case that memory is epistemically justified. This means that the memory must be veridical, i.e. it must be true to the past event, and the individual must have reasonable confidence in its accuracy. And when people have a strong evidence or have reasons to believe that their memories are accurate, then they can claim to know things based on those memories. If we think back to looking at the sort of ontology of knowledge in the earlier lessons, and we thought about the idea of justified true belief, then you have to think about the idea of truth is a very important feature of this basic understanding of belief and of what requires knowledge. Someone might know, for example, that they ate dinner at a particular restaurant last night because they remember the details of that experience very clearly, and they have no reason to doubt the accuracy of their memory. Linking back to our previous lesson on the subject of testimony, memory can also function as a form of testimony when individuals recall information from their past and they share that information with others. In this way, then, memory can extend beyond personal knowledge and can then start to contribute to collective knowledge of a community or a society. This does lead to ideas of skepticism. So, skeptical philosophers, such as that of René Descartes, who we'll get to in future lessons' time, raise concerns about the fallibility of memory. Descartes famously questioned whether anything known through the senses or through memory could be trusted at all. This is what is known as the Cartesian study of methodological skepticism. Now, this skeptic challenge is a challenge to whether or not we can be certain about what we know based on memory, since our recollections may be distorted or entirely false. I want to finish then by thinking a little bit more about what we noted previously in relation to personal identity, because the relationship between memory and personal identity is a very important subject within philosophical debate. And while it's not necessarily a subject that is deeply epistemological in nature, the philosophy of personal identity is one that is very interesting. Nevertheless, it's more of a philosophy of mind kind of question. As mentioned earlier, John Locke proposed the theory that personal identity can be based on memory. If a person at a future point in time can remember actions and experiences that they did at an earlier point in time, then they can be said to be the same person. It is therefore the idea of memory that is essential for maintaining the continuity of self over time, according to John Locke. By contrast, though, of course, critics of John Locke's view argue that memory cannot alone fully account for this idea of personal identity, and they do so on the basis that memory can be fallible. So if someone forgets a past event or is influenced by false memories, then this can raise questions of whether or not they are still the same person. And furthermore, to this question, some philosophers have even argued that memory is just one of many factors that contribute to personal identity. So the physical self, physical continuity, consciousness are also examples of other features of personal identity.